That's better. How is everyone?
Good, thanks, Duncan.
Not too shattered to be back in the virtual world.
It's getting a little bit boring now.
Only getting a little bit. That's
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly large understatement.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a positive spin on it.
Yeah. How things, Tom?
Yeah, I was actually going to go in person.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a online, like only online people and only in person.
Oh, yeah, no. This one is supposed to be dual delivery.
Yeah,
so it's supposed to be that that you can attend either online or physically.
Yeah.
But
I found the audio just a bit dim, like a bit low.
okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any way of me sort of changing settings to fix that. Let me have a go. I don't want to stuff everything up though. That's the problem. Audio settings. Here we go.
Not at the moment. You're fine now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe I just need to speak. Like I just need to be closer to the microphone. I can turn up the volume. Actually, I think. No, it's not letting me now.
You're fine. The audio is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Just
All right,
last.
we'll leave it for now. If it becomes a problem, let me know. How are you, Steffi?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not bad. I wish I was at uni, but so I thought I'd put myself on a Pacific island instead.
Yeah, I noticed. I was going to mention it. It looks lovely.
Yeah. Because I have this fear that that we're going to be here for probably longer than we hope. I'm trying to set up a fancier setup, like with different lights and things to make myself look prettier. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it set up today though. This class doesn't officially start until 15:15, does it? I'm just going to take that as a yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got 1 minute to make yourself look better. Not that you're looking bad, but
I'm going to need a lot longer than 1 minute to make myself look better.
I wasn't implying you're looking bad, but you just said you wanted to improve your setup. So
Yeah. It was really just about just clarity, I guess. Just I mean, you don't really need to see me that well. It's really the slides that matter. But I don't know. I think that it's just nice to have a decent image of whoever's doing the talking. I mean, I by that I mean like not just me as the person who's facilitating, but also like I really appreciate seeing you guys as well, because I can at least get some sort of feedback, visual feedback and that kind of stuff by you having your cameras on and things. This might work. Maybe not. Hey Lily, how are you? Dylan, how are you?
Good.
Yeah. too hard. We'll give it, what's the time now? 3:16. We'll give it four more minutes before we get started. And that gives me 4 more minutes to see if I can get this thing working.
What have you got work? What are you trying to do?
I've got like lights and stuff to try and, you know, make myself look beautiful.
Yeah, we appreciate that production value.
Yeah, I thought you would. Who else have we got dropping in? We've got hey Jacqueline, hey Morgan, hey Claire.
Hi, I'm going to be back. I was just chopping up an apple and I just decided to chop half my finger off. So I'll just be back in 1 sec.
That doesn't sound good. That really doesn't sound good at all. Hey to, I haven't said hello to Kate or Claire or Amelia or Michael or Beth or Eleanor or Lauren or Maddie, Avery, Michaela, Jack, Carl. How is everyone going? There's more actually. Hang on.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to. I was going to say welcome to hell. No, I don't mean that. Welcome back to fully online learning. It's not that bad. Brianna, hi, and then I have a. I want to close this thing. How do I close this? I don't know. We've got Jackson and Emily too. Hi, Jackson and Emily. All right, I'm giving up on the light. We're starting. Next time, I promise you, my production values will be through the roof. Couldn't get there for the day. Well, let's hope that next week. Actually, what have they said? When's this lockdown going until?
Tuesday.
Apparently.
Tuesday. So there is a remote possibility that we might see each other physically next Wednesday. However, I would say that the chances of that are fairly low. So I don't want to get your hopes up.
What's the probability on that?
The probability? I don't have a lot of data to actually. We do have a bunch of data. Like if you consider like all of the previous lockdowns, the initial amount of time that was stated for the lockdown period, and then how long it went on after that, you could make a mathematical model, definitely to determine the likelihood of us being able to attend physically next week. Good things though about, can I please ask for, thank you Lauren for showing me, for putting your video on. Can I ask everyone if you can to put your videos on? Like I look horrible too. Look at my hair. It's like something that was like grown in the 1970s or something. And I don't care if you're eating either, Carl. I'd still rather see your face. Okay. Yeah, because this is a workshop, and it's so nice to be able to, as much as we can, sort of interact with each other. And I mean, as teachers, you guys know that a lot of the way that you receive feedback is not through people, your students saying things, but a lot of it's body language, looks that they give you, all of those sorts of things. So in a workshop situation in particular, it's great to have videos on if we can. Welcome to our second session for Primary Maths 3. Do you like my my background for the front slide? Does anyone want to have a go at interpreting why I made that my background slide? No? Come on.
Dreaming of a holiday.
That's a really nice. Oh, sorry. All right. That's my virtual background. Yeah, absolutely. Have I not shared the actual slide yet? This is what I meant to share. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, I am definitely dreaming of a holiday. But hopefully now you can all see my slide. Is that correct? Yeah. Now, yeah. Interpret my opening slide.
You're going to hypnotize us?
Not me personally, but I think there might be a degree of hypnotism involved.
Brainwashed by data that you see on TV.
Yeah, Michaela, you're on fire. Not just TV, but I think like everywhere. So social media, the mass media. We just live in this super connected world now, where I feel like we're little nodes, and each one of us is being sort of hypnotized to an extent, or at least brainwashed, so that we're this sort of interconnected group of brainwashed nodes. So that's a really nice way to start off the the workshop. And I think in some ways I'm like this subject. Yeah, thanks, Jackson. You're onto it as well. I think in some ways this subject is not at all what people expect it to be. You see the word statistics and probability, and I'm sure that you're thinking, all right, we're going to learn a whole bunch of tools. We're going to learn how to do measures of central tendency. We're going to learn how to about different graph types and different representations of data. And yes, that will happen throughout this subject. But the major focus now really is, and the curriculum supports this, and especially the curriculum review, is trying to move our students beyond this sort of interconnected web of brainwashed people, and giving them the capabilities and the abilities to be able to sort through what might be considered fake news. I really shouldn't use that term. And also be able to look at research and say, yes, that's one perspective, but in order to get a better understanding of one of these big issues, we really need to look at a range of different research, a range of different evidence, in order to be able to inform our opinions. And you might be thinking, yeah, but we're teaching grade 5-6 students. This is all too much. But I think you'll see, especially when I take you through the resolve reconciliation data activity, you'll see that students can really understand ethical and moral sort of issues, as well as you know, the links to Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander histories and people, histories and culture. Yeah, and they can make that link to statistics. They can see how statistics can be incredibly powerful in terms of shaping our views and ideas and beliefs. Yeah. Does anyone have any comments on any of that stuff? So, were any of you excited to do lots of, you know, calculations of R values and stuff? No, because yeah, I don't think, yeah, you pretty much won't be doing that in this subject. All right, as it says there, welcome back to online learning. Woohoo! What we're going to do to start off with is we are going to unpack problem solving. And in order to be able to do that, I am hoping, I'm really, 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 really hoping that most of you did your reading throughout the last week. I did make a big point of saying that it's important, and I did also tell you that whilst it is dense and a bit boring at times, it is there are only 3, I reckon, that are really like that. So if you've already done that one, that's one, and you only have 66.6 recurring % left of those to do to be statistically accurate. Yeah, so I really want to unpack problem solving because I think that often teachers, schools, even systems misinterpret what mathematical problem solving is. So I would like all of us by the end of the session, hopefully, to have a reasonably shared sort of conception of what mathematical problem solving actually is. We'll then, as I said, have a look at a statistical inquiry, one that I believe does incorporate the ethical capability, as well as Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander histories and culture. Then we'll have a chat about how do we get students to collect valid and reasonable data. So data that will actually support their question that they have created. Remembering that last week, hopefully we all came up with a bit of a question that this week we can plan for data collection around. With the group this morning, I didn't get to the point of doing that. So if that happens, don't worry. It'll be the first thing that we do next week. And then I think starting next week, we might have, is it starting next week? We might have some 1 or 2 presentations. Is that right? No? I'm probably wrong. All right. Might be the following week. Anyway, you can see my little image there. We've got a magnet and all these little people, and all of their data is being sucked up. Yeah, that's quite an obvious metaphor. Okay, so whoops. So here are the questions. I'll have a bit of a chat to you about the questions. Oh, his name's there. So I was going to ask you who recognizes that guy. And that was going to be a pretty easy question given that his name was there. That is George Polya. Can anyone tell me about George Polya? And you should be able to if you did the reading. Anyone? Oh, this is a test. I'll just tell you then. George, it might be Georg, I'm not sure, Polya, is largely regarded as the founding father of mathematical problem solving. He wrote a book called How to Solve It, which basically outlined all of the mathematical problem solving heuristics, or most people call them strategies, that you see in most maths classrooms. So things like taking a simpler problem first and using that to help you solve a more difficult problem, making a table, working backwards is one of them. Trial and error is definitely one of the strategies. What are some of the others? Oh, drawing a diagram. Yeah, so there's lots of them. George Polya, as I said, founding father of mathematical problem solving, and he did write How to Solve It. And if you're interested, it's not that hard to read. But I do feel that we've moved on a fair way since then, because I think that sometimes one of the issues with these heuristics is that we basically tell kids, all right, here's a problem, and this is the strategy I want you to solve it with, and this is how you do it. We're really trying hard to have the students explore and investigate the problems collaboratively, and decide on what they think collaboratively might be an appropriate method of solving the problem. We've got so early on, Lester talks about teaching for and via problem solving. Have a chat about what the differences are. This one's a big one that I really want you to talk about. Have a chat about the examples of mathematical problem solving that you've either seen in your placement classrooms or that you have taught in your placement classrooms. Talk about if you have taught them yourself, I'd be really interested in hearing what the major challenges were for you in terms of your teaching of mathematical problem solving, and then perhaps what some of the sort of methods to remediate those challenges you had were. I don't know if there was a word necessary there. Anyway, what differentiates problem solving as Lester perceives it from the sorts of problems that you find at the end of most of those like Heinemann or Rigby maths books. And the last one's a really, really good question for you all, I think. And while you're discussing that, I might see if I can find a file that might be useful for that as well. How do we go about assessing mathematical problem solving? It's very, very easy to assess procedures, skills, fluency. Not so easy to assess problem solving and reasoning. And yet problem solving and reasoning are becoming, well, they're not becoming, but they're realistically, they are more important in many ways, along with conceptual understanding, than fluency, which is what we continue to assess, usually in pre and post tests, and yeah, so we give them a test that asks them to solve procedures. We teach them how to solve those procedures. They do another test where they solve those procedures, and we go, wow, look at the growth, we're amazing. Anyway, sorry. That's me ranting once again. All right, so what I'm gonna do, what I worked out was that I can let all of you choose the breakout room that you want to go into. And the reason I will do that is so that you can go into the breakout room of the group that you are in for the statistical investigation cycle. Does that make sense? So I think if I click on, all right, how many is are there? There's 24. All right, I'm just gonna make like 6 groups, and hopefully, or maybe even 8. I'll make 8 groups. I'll let you participate. You choose which room you go into. Hopefully, you can work out which room you need to go into based on the groups that we made last week. Does that make sense? All right, this is a problem-solving task. There we go. All right, create. Okay, yeah, people are getting the hang of it. That's good.
Duncan, I think I have a later version or an earlier version of the Zoom. So
Yeah, I can allocate you. Dylan, whose group were you in?
Well, Eleanor, I think, and Jackson and Carl, I think.
Okay, I will allocate you guys. Eleanor, Jackson, Carl. None of you at the moment. Oh no, Jackson just allocated himself somewhere, so hopefully I can allocate you there. Okay, all right. So that's group 6. Okay, should be going in. Maddie, how are you going?
I'm good. I have the same problem.
Okay.
I'm meant to be in one.
Who's in group 1?
Yeah, group 1.
Okay, I will assign you to group 1. And Chris?
Thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, group 2, please.
No worries. There we go. All done. Still not joined. Yeah. I don't know what's going on there. Ah, there we go. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Do you know which group you were in from last week?
Yes, I do. I can go back into it, I think, once I find them.
Okay.
I just have really terrible internet, so you might see me pop in and out like this.
Okay, no worries. You're always the first one, Tom. You're always the first person back.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're mostly back now. We're just going to quickly go through our groups. In the end, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. In the end, we ended up with 7 groups. Room 1, which consisted of Brianna, Kate, Madison, Steffi, and Thomas. Would you like to share some inspiring epiphanies that your group developed? No? Anyone?
I think Steffi raised a really interesting point. One of her students that she tutors, she was talking about how she doesn't, or she or he doesn't read the question. Like when they're doing problem solving, they just look at the numbers and then they either multiply or add them together. So she was like, one way that she overcame that when she was assessing like her problem solving, she'd asked the student to find the answer 5 different ways.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I think that was really neat.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks. Yeah, but it definitely helped. Like she typically would just like read through the question, so, and not really understand what's going on in the question. She just will see like the numbers and be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to plus them together and we'll see what happens. That's probably going to be the answer. Like doesn't have a real understanding of like whether something is like addition or if it's multiplication. She would just like assume that it's one or the other, just take a guess and we'll just add the numbers together. So then I've started like putting other numbers into the question to kind of almost throw her off a little bit to see which parts of the question she was actually like picking up on. If she was going to just randomly plus all three numbers together, if she was going to like slowly started to like realize which parts were crucial to the question, which is really great. But I think the lack of that in her school, or like the lack of, I guess, one-on-one time with her teacher to identify that that's her issue, is what's led to her not being able to actually problem solve and identify like the key parts of the question. So yeah, that's definitely helped with her, which is really awesome to see.
I think there are a lot of kids who are mathematically fine, but they rush everything and they want to be the first to finish everything. And as a result, they don't like read the questions really carefully and comprehend the questions as well as they're probably capable of. And I mean, other than telling them to slow down, to really, I mean, you can get them to do things like underline the keywords and things like that. It's definitely a problem. I mean, people like Joe Bowler has written a lot about the fact that we've created this culture in maths education where speed is seen as superiority, I guess, in some way, and we need to realign our values so that we don't value speed, that we're not where what we're after is considered logical, systematic thought. And who cares if you can do your multiplication facts in 30 seconds flat? Like, if as long as you as long as you have the underlying conceptual understanding that you can utilize, then that's what matters. Room 2. So that's Beth, Chris, Lily.
Yeah, we basically just spoke about moving away from like looking at the end sum and like getting students to talk about how they worked out the problem. So like with worded problems, like and teaching them to highlight the words that are required for that sum. So for example, if they're like, I ate 5 apples, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to subtract? Does that mean we're going to add? So there are different ways. I mean, I was in a grade 1 class, so you can see this basic problem solving. But yeah, just kind of getting students to talk about the way that they went about to solve their problem as opposed to just the answer.
Cool. Any other comments? No. Room 3. So that, for those of you who don't know, that's Jack, Jacqueline, Lauren, and Michaela.
Yep. We talked a bit about the teaching for problem solving and teaching via problem solving idea.
What was your consensus? What was your conception?
Well, we liked the teaching via problem solving approach that we've, I guess, seen some of the sort of, teaching the students to problem solve, and like, this is how I want you to solve the thing. Here's the problem, or here's the concept, and then here's a problem, and here's how I want you to solve it. That we have seen that in schools. Like someone said, just putting on a YouTube video of the concept and then having the students go about a problem in the way that they've been told to do it. Whereas,
So my take on teaching for versus via, if it's the way I understood it is, if it's teaching for problem solving, it's for the sake of developing problem solving skills. If it's teaching via problem solving, it's using problem solving as a vehicle to teach content. And my view is that you can do both at the same time, and that you should attempt to do both at the same time. So that's just where I lie on the continuum.
Can I just ask though, so about that idea of, like I've seen in schools, like the cubed method and stuff, where they look at a word problem and they say, well, here's how you should now read this word problem. And I feel like that's kind of like teaching students how to read word problems, but like, why are they not just having some context for the problem that makes sense in their real life? Like, why do we have to teach them to read a problem?
No, I agree with you completely. Basically, you're teaching them literacy skills, which aren't actually, and a lot of the time, their problem is not actually the literacy. Like they might quite well understand what the question's asking, and so all the underlining and all of the definitions of the words under the sun aren't going to help them because they don't actually get the mathematical concept. So that's where you as the teacher really need to be. Generally, I mean, the way I like to do these sorts of inquiries is give kids a short period at the start where I fully explain a problem. It's like a really rich contextualized problem. Give them a bit of time to get into groups and to chat about it and to sort of start to theorize about some different approaches that we might take to solving the problem. Bring everyone back together, have a discussion about some of those different methods, record them up on the whiteboard, that sort of thing. Send them off again. Usually after that discussion, they've got a much better idea. They're much more clearly sort of able to identify the deeper conceptual mathematics that's required. The other thing that you can do, I don't know if, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Peter Sullivan, are you? Yeah, Peter Sullivan works at Monash. He's all into challenging tasks, which is just another basically way of just talking about mathematical problem solving or investigations or inquiry or whatever you want to call them. He has a nice approach called extending and enabling prompts. So he basically, before the lesson, photocopies a whole bunch of enabling prompts that provide really clear hints to kids that are just not getting it. And then also he does the same thing for extending prompts for the kids who are just finding it way too easy. So that's a nice way of sort of differentiating when you're taking an inquiry-based approach to mathematics.
Duncan, my school that I was at, they were implementing that method while I was there, so they just started doing it. So I had to learn how to. Pardon?
How did it go?
It was interesting, but the teachers themselves were we're in a 5-6 class with lots of lower sort of achieving students, and the problem was the teachers planning all those problems. They plan it really hastily, and so they quickly map out a whole week of these problems and all these enabling prompts, and the enabling and extending prompts were fine, but the initial questions half the time weren't that great.
So were they, can I ask, were they just coming up with the questions themselves?
Yeah.
Well, that's where their problem was.
Yeah. They had the Peter Sutherland book, but then the lead teacher was kind of directing it all, but he'd come in for the planning session for about 10 minutes, and then all the other 4 teachers would do the planning, and they'd quickly just bash out some questions, and then they'd all photocopy them during the week, and it was, some of the questions weren't very well developed.
Okay, so I think now is a good time actually to show you the Resolve website, because it is a really great resource, not only because I was responsible for writing one of the lesson sequences, but also because it basically has inquiry units of mathematics that from foundation all the way through to year 10 that cover all aspects of statistics and probability, measurement and geometry, and number and algebra. So if you go to resolve.edu.au, it's also current as well, which I think is really good because, I mean, Maths 300, there's lots of good stuff on there, but it's so old now. Anyway, teaching resources. Let's look at, given that we're looking at stats, let's look at planning playgrounds. All right, so this is a year 1 investigation. Obviously, if you're talking about planning playgrounds with year 1 kids, they're immediately going to be invested in it. They're going to think that it's interesting. Anyway, you can see just straight away that the lesson sequences is divided into 4 separate lessons. We've got drawing a playground, and then I think there's some data collection and organization of data. Going further, asking another class about their interests in terms of playgrounds, and then they decide on an ideal playground based on the data that they've collected. Now, I'll just show you exactly how to go through the process, because sometimes people, I don't know, sometimes people struggle with it. So you click download all resources, and then it will be downloaded as a zip file, and I'm not going to pay for WinRAR. And then you will have, I'm going to make a new window on my desktop, on my very messy desktop, statistics, investigation, playground, investigation, playground, year 1. Doesn't matter. My folder is going to be called something that doesn't look very good, but I don't really care. And anyway, then I'm going to drag all my resources in there, and I'll just share this with you so you can see what is provided. This is that. I think that's the one I'm looking for. Yes. Okay. So this. Oh, these are all the resources that came out of that zip folder. You've got resources for printing. Let's have a look at this. Oh, that's nice. Can you all see the Blackline master that's been printed?
No.
Well, I will share that. So yeah, so it provides you with these Blackline masters, so kids can cut out the different parts of the playground and create an ideal playground. What else do we have in there? Oh, it's gonna, it's color. So your school's gonna get cranky with you for using the printing allowance, but you'll just have to cope with that. And then there are student sheets. So let's look at student sheet 3 out of interest. And I'll share this. So I think there were 2 student sheets. This is one of them. So here you can see plotted, the kids can plot which is the favorite playground equipment for the class. So this might be the seesaw, swing, slide, you get the idea. And then they have the ability to do some qualitative sort of analysis. In what ways are the graphs similar? In what ways are the graphs different? What does this tell us? What conclusions can we draw from the data that we've collected and analyzed and graphed? Anything else that's interesting in there? Let's have a look. There's also obviously just the lesson plan, the lesson sequence plan. This one. Yeah, so every one of the resolve lesson sequences has a very extensive lesson plan. As you can see, this one goes on and on and on forever. It tells you about, it gives you approximations of time. It references the attachments that I showed you. It's a pretty much one-stop shop. And the nice thing about them is that they are, in my opinion, really rich, really open-ended sorts of investigations. And you don't have to teach them in the way that the Resolve authors would have you teach them. You can adapt them however you like, but it's definitely, in my opinion, going to be better than in your PLC saying, right, this week we're teaching stats. What should we do? Let's make some stuff up. Oh yeah, and we need some enabling and extending prompts. This is not to. I don't know. What do you guys think? What did you think of that as a resource? Yep, good. Okay. All right. I'm glad. All right. Let's move on. What's the time?
Hey, Duncan.
Yep.
Just while you were talking about that, I was trying to remember who it was, but at the MAV conference recently, there was someone did a whole presentation about extending and enabling prompts. Michael Minus.
Yes. I know.
It was really good. I don't know if it's possible for other people to be able to access just that presentation, but
I can probably make it available. I can probably, I think I've got access to all those videos. So yeah, I'll put them. I think I can give you access to like a folder in my Google Docs. So especially because you have your own Canvas site, which is so much better than it was last semester. That just got way too confusing. I'll have a look and see if I can find, if I'm able to download all of those videos, and then put them in the Google Drive and then give you guys access to that.
I just put the name of the one that I was talking about.
What about mine? Don't you want mine, Lauren?
I was at both of yours because I was helping you, even though you were.
Yes, you were, but like the implication that I took from that was that mine's not worth sharing with the rest of the group.
Yours are interesting too, but this one's relevant and on topic, so just
That's
putting that
true.
one there.
That's true. No, I don't really take offense.
We can do the ones about the patterns and things. I found that interesting.
Yeah. They were very different, the two of mine anyway. Thursday, 11:30. Yeah, okay. All right. I'll sort that out. I'll try to get all of them. And I'll try to give you all access to them. Obviously, I can't post them on Canvas because I think there's like a 20 gigabyte limit or something per subject. And I would blow that like so quickly because of all the videos and various other things. I'm rambling. We really need to move on. Okay. So I've just shown you an early years example of statistical inquiry. I'm now going to show you an older years example of statistical inquiry. So this one's called reconciliation data. I think some of you have potentially seen it before. Have you? If you've all seen it before, tell me, and we won't go through it. Whoops! Why is that happening? Have you seen reconciliation data before? No one. Okay. All right. This is fantastic. It's from Resolve. The thing that I love about it is that I believe that it links really well to the Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander histories and culture capability, as well as the ethical capability. One thing to consider as we go through this is the data that it's referring to is from 2014. So I'm really, really hoping that, well, actually, no, that would give the game away. I'm not going to say anything about that. You can make your own judgments on the data. So basically, it's called the Reconciliation Barometer. And the way it works was that a whole bunch of Australians were presented with a bunch of statements, and they were asked to either agree or disagree with those statements. And it starts with a bit of a video. Ooh. Let's...
In every nation's story, there are important moments, events, and crossroads that shape the chapters to come. It is these moments that a nation has a chance to ask itself who we are and who we want to be. For all Australians, this ancient land connects the stories of our past, our present, and our future. But the story we tell today has many gaps. Chapters not connected, with parts of our history left off the records. Silenced in classrooms, missing in papers. This untold, untaught story leaves parts of our nation holding the burden of trauma, while others live with a historical blind spot. Shielded from not only...
Well, I'm not sure why that stopped. I will put it back to somewhere near where it was.
Everyone. If we know that our diversity makes us richer, if we know we are stronger together, what lays ahead of us is a journey of truth. In writing this next chapter together, the common ground we have is that we are all here, woven into this country in this moment in time. So let's make history we can all be proud of. Reconciliation in Australia. Our history, our story, our future.
Okay, you can see there, comes from reconciliation.org.au. So after this workshop, I'm actually going to jump on there and see if there is maybe some more recent data. I'm not going to make you do this, but in your class, after you perhaps show your students that video, you might get them to do a think, pair, share, write down what you think reconciliation means, find a friend and discuss your idea, and as a class group, report the ideas of your partner. As part of this survey, individuals were asked, who is reconciliation for? And here are 4 of the responses to that question. Okay, I think reconciliation is something the government should do something about, which is really not telling us anything about his understanding of reconciliation, but he thinks that it's definitely something that's important. I think reconciliation involves all of us. If we're not together on this, then we'll never have a united country. We have a young man here in a lovely suit who believes that I think reconciliation is just for certain groups in the community to sort out for themselves. And then we finally have this young lady. Reconciliation is important, but it is an adult problem. Kids can't do anything about it. I actually don't know whether those comments are legitimate. I suspect that they're not, because I just think that they're almost too sort of controversial. Like for example, the young man telling people that, you know, they can sort their own problems out, and is obviously a very controversial statement to make. And also the young girl saying, us kids can't do anything about it, so we don't need to worry, is clearly also something that is fairly controversial as well. Other comments that I have about this slide, and so I didn't make it, so I can critique it. I don't know why they only used white Anglo-Saxons as their population, as their sample. I find that a bit odd. But something that I think is really important, before we go into the actual quantitative statistics, is to consider that data is not just numbers. I mean, I know this sounds obvious, but every single one of these statements, if these were statements made by people in a survey, they would be incredibly important pieces of data to deconstruct. For example, you know, the young man who says, I think reconciliation is just for certain groups in the community to sort out for themselves. There's so much you can sort of read into that. I mean, the first thing that I see there is the fact that he uses the pronoun I straight away, which kind of gives me the impression that he may be slightly egocentric. Is just for certain groups. He's not labeling those groups. He's not telling us who those groups are. He's just saying it's for some unknown sort of group of people that doesn't include perhaps the majority, to sort out for themselves. So it's a problem that that should be dealt with by the group who he believes that it affects, who are the Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people. He definitely does not hold the belief that actually reconciliation is a concept, is an idea that impacts and affects us all as Australians. But yeah, so yeah, it's as well as stats being really, really important in terms of data. Language, discourse, the qualitative side of things, in my view, can be just as, or actually often more powerful. Does anyone want to make any comments about any of that? No.
What was the sample size?
I have no idea. That's what I meant, Thomas, about I wasn't sure what the methodology was, whether these were made up. But if you go to reconciliation.org, I reckon you should be able to find out. The other thing I would say is that in terms of qualitative data, it's sample size is far less important than quantitative data. If you had, say, you know, a decent number of people from across communities in Australia, say 20 to 30, and you had some survey data, some data that that provided you with information about their views about reconciliation and who's responsible for it and all of those different things, that would actually be quite a large sample. That would actually be quite a large qualitative sample. It's only when we're looking to sort of average results out and generalize results that where sample size really matters. Does that make sense? Yep. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Okay. I already mentioned to you the fact that this is from 2014. This data I know is real data. It's only the previous page data that I question, but I know, but this is absolutely legitimate data, and I'm sorry I don't know the sample size for it. So actually, just before I do show it to you, I'm not going to talk during it. All I want you to do is look at it, take it in, and I guess reflect on it. Okay. For me, actually, any comments from any of you guys? Any reflections on that data? No. I mean, my main reflection on, I mean, I have a lot of reflections actually on that data, but just that last slide in particular was pretty eye-opening. We are proud of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. 85% are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and just over 50% of the general community. Like, I thought that was pretty telling in terms of how far we have to come in terms of reconciliation, because I don't see how reconciliation can be achieved if only half of your population are actually proud and want to acknowledge and see our Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people as the original inhabitants of Australia, but also as having such a rich and untapped in many ways culture and history. Yeah. Any other comments? It's pretty eye-opening sort of stuff. So in the classroom, the next step for 5-6 students is for them to take a number of those statements and then to do a side-by-side comparison graph with their peers. So they take the information from that they've been given from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population, the general population, and then they do a comparison. They collect this data from their peers, and they'll end up with a 3-way side-by-side column graph. You can also obviously get them to dive more deeply into the individual statements, and you could do things like ordinal scales, like Likert scales, going from strongly agree to strongly disagree. They can use tallies, or they can use counters to count data points. They can also color in segments of 100 square matrices to represent percentages. Okay. All right, I think we'll move on now. So we've still got 20 minutes. We're not doing that badly for time. It's unusual for me, really. Right, so last week we spent a fair bit of time attempting to understand and define a problem. That is a really, really big and challenging thing to do, like particularly for school kids. And so there has to be some really clear, explicit discussion of what the sorts of problems that we're going to be able to investigate are, and how we might go about that. And that will bring you to the planning phase, where you talk to the students, or the students talk to you, and discuss what is it that we're actually going to measure to help us to solve our problem. And I think study design should really go before that. Basically, how are we going to map out our study? We now have a problem, and we feel that our problem can be answered through a statistical investigation. We need to formulate a study design where we firstly decide what the data is that needs to be measured and how it is that we're going to measure it. We also need to be really, really careful and really, really systematic about the way that we both collect and record the data. Because so often, those kids that we were talking about before who just want to rush to get everything finished, they will also be the students who say that they've done the data collection, but it's not probably going to lead them to be able to come up with a reasonable and valid conclusion. It's funny, really. Like, you look at this thing, PPDAC cycle, and it's designed for statistical education for primary school students, upper primary school usually students, but really it's the same process that you go through when you're doing university research. So that's an interesting take on it. The other thing, as I mentioned before, it's also, this parallels scientific investigation as well. Most of these things are all part of scientific investigation. Scientific investigation usually always involves numeric statistical data collection and analysis, and then graphs and representations of that data, and then hopefully some sort of answer to whatever the initial question was. You might end up at the point of data collection today. Remember I told you last week you can either do a survey. If you want to do that, maybe chuck a Google form together and put a link to it in the chat. Or you can use secondary data. So you can use ABS data, whatever it is, Worldwide Fund for Nature, that kind of thing. But what I want you to be really aware of, and this is actually where I want things to change, I guess, where they do need to change in terms of schools, is confirmation bias. This is becoming a bigger and worse persistent thing, sort of month by month, year by year, in the current age that we're living in. So confirmation bias, I know you probably know this, but it's our tendency to cherry pick information that confirms our existing beliefs or ideas. And it explains why sometimes a bunch of data can be collected and two people with diametrically opposed points of view can use that data to support their argument. So there's something weird going on there. Where we mostly see cognitive bias or confirmation bias is in really strongly held, ingrained, ideologically or emotionally charged views. So do you want me to, I won't give you examples of those. You can think of those examples yourself. But I think a key to all of this, and a key to what we need to teach our students, is that if we're aware of confirmation bias, then we really do need to identify it in ourselves and do our very best to see all sides of whatever the debate is, or whatever the investigation is. So, and I mean, if you look at climate science, I mean, the vast weight of evidence says that human-made climate change is a significant thing, and it's a significant problem. the vast majority of scientific literature shows that. The unfortunate thing is that there's often a loud minority. There's groups, there's lobby groups from mining and oil and whatever else who get messages out there that kind of dilute the message of the legitimate science. So that's something we need to be aware of as well. We can be cautious of data that seems to mean, one thing that I think is really, really easy to do is to start off with a premise, to start off with a belief, and then to go about proving your premise or your belief. That's not scientific. It's not statistical. What is scientific and statistically based is to genuinely ask a question and to think about a methodology that will genuinely give an objective account of whatever the phenomenon is that you're looking at. And I know all of this sounds like pretty big ideas for, I guess, primary school, but it's the world that they're confronted with nowadays. And so I think that the sooner that they understand these sorts of things, definitely the better. And it's not just me that says that. Neil deGrasse Tyson also says that. One of the biggest problems with the world today is that we have large groups of people who will accept whatever they hear on the grapevine just because it suits their worldview, not because it is actually true or because they have evidence to support it. The striking thing is that it would not take much effort to establish validity in most of these cases, but people prefer reassurance to research. And I'm just going to show you a quick video of him as well talking about this issue. It does include the SH word. So for those of you who don't want to hear that word, turn your sound off now.
I think no one would give up the internet today, in spite of the problems that it has presented us. You know, it started out, oh, this is kind of fun. We can watch cat videos all day. Or, you know, that's most of the information that came across was instructive or humorous or enlightening. It didn't start turning mean until a few years in, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, definitely beginning at least 5 years ago, where people see it as a way to tribalize us. You don't agree with my opinion, you're wrong, and I'm going to fight you for it. I didn't grow up in that environment. I don't think anyone else did either. It was, you have a different opinion, cool, tell me about it, let's go have a beer, we'll talk about it. Not, I will argue with you until you are dead, unless you agree with my opinion. So something's not right there. And everybody's got an opinion, and so there it goes. The internet is this clearinghouse of opinions, but nothing gets cleared. Well, opinions ossify, making it a rather rigid place to navigate. We have access to more information than ever before. That's a good thing. It gives good information some hope. But are we trained? Do we have the tandem training to know whether the information you just were exposed to is legitimate? Is it real? Is it false? Is it true? You can't just hand people new kinds of information without expecting them to be confused by it without some training that would have occurred before it. Maybe all school curricula should be how to determine reliable sources and how not. How to know when it's not reliable.
Amen.
Is that in the curriculum? Not last I looked. Maybe in journalism school, but not in K through 12. Not in college, I haven't seen much of it. So, yeah, we need practice. Better yet, we need science literacy. Science literacy empowers you to know when someone else is full of shit. And it's simple. What is science literacy? Is understanding how things work, how physiology works, how chemistry works, how physics works, engineering, all of this. You don't have to be an engineer or be a scientist, just understand how certain basic systems work. So that when someone is ready to sell you homeopathic medicine, where they've diluted the active ingredients from the water so that there's no molecules left in the water, and they sell that to you, and they're telling you that the water remembers the medicine that used to be in it, and you're going to hand money to someone for that? I'm not going to complain to you. I'm going to say, let's go together and look at how you were trained. Let's look at the syllabus that you were handed when you were in school. Here's where you're missing a few things. Here's where you're missing how to ask questions. Science is not a satchel of knowledge. It's a way of querying nature and a way of querying other people who are making claims about nature. That's where the empowerment comes from. It's an inoculation against charlatans. That's how you're going to know the difference going forward.
So what did people think about that? Any comments? Really? Yeah, I think it's getting late on what is it? Today's Thursday, isn't it? Yeah.
It's Thursday.
Yeah. It's not just
It's Wednesday, Duncan, just in case you
is it Wednesday?
Later.
Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. My watch was telling me it was Thursday. It's not just Neil deGrasse Tyson. There's plenty of people before that have said very, very similar things, including Francis Bacon. Back in 1617, he said, once the human mind has favoured certain views, it pulls everything else into agreement with and support for them. Should they be outweighed by more powerful countervailing considerations, it either fails to notice these or scorns them, or makes fine distinctions in order to neutralise and so reject them. I'm becoming increasingly frustrated by the world that we live in, where I live in an ivory tower, where I have access to all of the data, all of the ability to be able to analyze the data, all of the ability to be able to tell the charlatans from the absolute rubbish. But what our kids are not getting is that education necessarily. Some of them do, absolutely. Some of you're all part of our ivory tower, but I think that for the 21st century, as we move into the post-truth era, as it's become known, this stuff has just become more and more and more and more important and more powerful. Yes. I'm not gonna. We've run. Well, do you know what? We've run out of time for the bit that we were gonna do on your data this week. But I promise you, which is what happened in the last workshop as well. I promise you, we will start the first 30 minutes of next week's workshop on that. Okay. So bring your question along. Make sure that if my suggestion would be if you're surveying the group, create a Google form that you can put a link to in the chat. Make a Google Doc for your group so that you know who's in that group. But yeah, you'll be given half an hour to plan to do your study design and to also perhaps begin collecting data. Does that make sense? Cool. That allows me to rave on more.
But I found these results on search.
Google, be quiet. That now allows me just to talk a bit more about what I was talking about before. So there's a really nice paper from actually this year, and it's called Education for a Post-Truth World: New Directions for Research and Practice, and it reports the following challenges for teachers. So students and teachers accepting and teaching and spreading false news. That's a really, really major concern. Everyone as expert. So the classic example of that is everyone's been to school and therefore everyone is an expert in education. And then putting opinion before fact, not understanding the difference between the two. Mostly kids can understand the difference between something like a humpback whale. Is it a humpback whale that's the largest? No, blue whale. A blue whale being the largest mammal in the world. Like, that is a fact. There's no doubt about that. But when it gets dangerous is when we start to sort of get to areas that are theories that are so widely accepted that they basically are fact, but we can't call them fact. So an example would be Darwinian evolution. In my view, an example via natural selection. In my view, an example would be human created climate change. Like the statistics and the data is there. There is zero doubt about it. And the problem with that is that it's kind of used as a weapon against science and scientists, because they say these things are just theories. You have data, we have data, therefore why should we believe your data any more than we believe our data? So this is a real, and this is the post-truth world we live in, and these are the things that we need to deal with when we're dealing with statistical literacy, statistical critical literacy, ethical capabilities, all of those things. Yeah. Does anyone have any comments on any of that?
Not so much that. I heard a couple of teachers sort of talk about on placement when lockdown was announced on our last placement about their views on the government's handling of coronavirus and things. And I was, I guess, privy to a few teachers, not comments to their students, but just saying this is what the government needs us to do and blah, blah, and sort of just intimating that maybe it wasn't in their opinion, the best public health response, and kind of passing it on to the kids. And my own thought was, but we're not public health experts, so we can't really, but it was, again, it's that emotional connection to lockdowns. Also, and the kids do feel it, absolutely. I'm not saying they don't, but it just felt a little, I don't know, irresponsible maybe.
Yeah, and I mean I'm the worst person to spend significant time with, because you can have a conversation with me, and if you ever make a claim or a comment that is even slightly contentious, I will ask you to provide me with the evidence for that comment, because I just can't handle mistruths. I guess I'm an empiricist in that respect. Yeah, so don't ever try to hang out with me for coffee or anything, because I'll bore you to tears. Okay, the massive flow of information, large parts of which are inaccurate or indifferent to accuracy, has eroded the sense that it is worthwhile or possible to distinguish fact from opinion and fiction. So that's going into sort of what I was talking about before. What's the time? We've sort of hit the mark. Can I have 3 more minutes? Is that okay? Yep. Okay. So here are some recommendations finally for how we can deal with some of these issues that I have been describing. The first one is to design really authentic learning environments. And by that, if you simply look at the Indigenous learning sequence that we looked at earlier, it's a really authentic learning experience that will help students develop an understanding of statistics, Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander history and culture, a lot of the stigma that still exists around Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander histories and culture, and also the ethical capability. So that's a huge one. Also supporting adaptive epistemic performance with bounded knowledge, including recognizing when one can and cannot engage in independent evaluation. What that's basically saying, in my view, is if you don't know the answer, if you're not sure about something, say that. Be honest. Don't tell kids stuff that don't just to fill in the space or because you feel like you have to. It's super important that kids are comfortable with the idea that often we won't know the answers, but there are ways for us to go out and to research these things. Appreciating conditions under which different aims, ideals, and processes are appropriate. I think, yeah, so that's really talking about sort of how we might go about that inquiry process. Conducting explorations into knowing, promoting virtuous, I like this one, promoting virtuous epistemic motivations and emotions. The way I read that is basically teaching kids about integrity and what it is, about that if we as people have integrity, then the way that we collect and report data and analyze that data will be wholly and completely objective. And because as soon as you put your subjective lens on data, and I'm sure some of you are probably doing some of you doing research you're mostly doing research projects at the moment, aren't you? Yeah. As soon as you start with an outcome and work your way back to that outcome, that's not valid research. That's not valid. That's actually not acting with integrity. So I guess that's a really important one. Making sure that students understand that to change the data in some way, to manipulate it in some way, so that it supports their opinion, is not acting with integrity. That's a pretty big major one, I think. And promoting an understanding of epistemic systems. So yeah, understanding the real messy social epistemology of institutions, social media, and so on. Life, especially now that we live in, is incredibly messy, incredibly it's so difficult to sort the truth from what's not true, that what was to me a subject, so this subject, Primary Maths 3, it used to be a subject where I did a lot of, okay, let's look at sort of different graphs, and we will do that, don't worry. And let's think about which graph is better for which particular subject area. But it's now evolved into a subject where we develop sort of pedagogies that will allow our students to be able to sort through all of this data, all of this information in the post-truth world that we live in. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. We'll go through study design questions next week at the very beginning. However, I would like you to read the Jaworski chapter on investigating mathematics teaching. It's a foundational sort of text. Oops. It really kind of was one of the first papers to talk about how investigative and inquiry-based approaches first came into being, and some of the challenges that were felt by maths teachers when they were trialing that. The Wild and Van Kook article is the one where that really introduced the PPDAC framework that we've already had a look at. Okay, so that is the end of me talking. Does anyone have any questions, comments, statements before I leave?
I have a question about the first assignment, Duncan.
Yep.
It asks us to find a topic within the statistics, within the statistics curriculum, and there's the two sub-strands there, the chance and data representation and interpretation. Do you find sort of a concept within those content descriptors, or is it just about focusing on?
So I mean, statistics is full of. Well, I mean, I've just been through a whole bunch of concepts.
Yeah. I wasn't sure exactly what we were meant to be focusing on.
So, I mean, you know, if you wanted to, you could do a lesson, you could do a poster on confirmation bias, and there's actually lots of other types of bias too, that are relevant to statistics. Yeah. So you could do that, or you could do variation, the concept of variation. That's hugely important. Like, for example, if you flip a coin 10 times, you might get 7 heads and 3 tails. If you flip a coin 1,000,000 times, you're going to get much more closely, you're going to get much closer to 50% of the coins being heads and 50% of the coins being tails.
Yeah.
Although there'll be a bigger difference in the number of heads and tails. I'm not even going to bother to try and explain that right now.
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. But so basically, so that's a concept. As we increase the experimental probability, the experimental and the theoretical, the number of trials, the experimental and the theoretical probability converge. So they converge at the point of infinity. Yeah, these are big concepts. I probably should have given you easier concepts to think about.
That's all right. I'll have a think.
What's another one that's probably a bit simpler? Pie charts. You might want to talk about creating pie charts with primary school students. There are ways of doing it that are far easier than the old work. All right, we've got 15 out of 20 Smarties red. So 15 divided by 20 multiplied by 360 over 1 will give us the number of degrees or whatever it is. So and in fact, one of the readings that you'll be doing later on shows a really developmental way of creating pie charts that kids from lower primary school can sort of handle. What else? You can really choose to do like the stuff that I'm really interested in terms of statistics, and is the stuff that is connected to this whole idea of the ethical capability.
Yeah.
Now, so how do you ensure that as you're teaching these inquiry cycles, PPDAC cycles, that your students are doing it in a valid and reliable way, that they understand that you can't count your data, you got your sets of data twice, or that you know, all of that sort of thing. I mean, even just your topic could be being systematic in statistical inquiry. As it could be as simple as that. I think that it's going to be pretty hard to do badly on this assignment. I will be marking it,